So we're really excited for everybody to be here and looking forward to sharing some action plans as well as some tips and tricks and how you can improve your operations. So I'm Nikki. I'm the marketing specialist here at Boost Midwest, and I'm joined with several of others of our team. And so to get started, Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Justin Murdoch, a client associate here at Boost Midwest. Today, I'll mostly be monitoring the chat to make sure that any of your questions get answered, and I'm excited to be here today.
Bill Warden here with Boost. Look forward to participating today as well.
And today you'll be hearing from Marie Stacks. She's the president and CEO of Boost Midwest. As Justin mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in, or if you want to put those in the chat box, totally fine. Justin and Bill will be monitoring, and we'll also have a Q&A section, so we can also go there. So without further ado, Marie, you want to take it off?
Absolutely. Well, we're glad to have you guys here today. As Nikki mentioned, we're going to go through quite a few different things today. So we're going to start with your business strengths and core and how to really amplify those, and the key areas of your organizational health, the overview of operations methodology. So we have a particular methodology that we have used in the past, and we want to leverage that and share it with you so you can use it yourself. And most incredibly awesome piece, which is what makes things stick, is the managing and creating sustainable results. So we will jump straight in. So like Nikki mentioned, Marie Stacks, CEO at Boost Midwest. And let's start with how we're going to get you to the number one item on our list, which is know your strengths. So, excuse me. Really, this is one of my favorite parts of any business development and business organizational strategy. And it's knowing your strengths. Know what it is that you're good at so that you can enhance and build upon it. You have to really be good at something, otherwise you wouldn't be in business, right? You wouldn't have folks calling you. And so thinking about what is it that makes your team great? What sets your team apart? What really are your defining features? So to do that, I want you to start thinking about what is it that people call you for? Why do people reach out and ask for you to help? What is it that your team is proud to deliver? There's plenty of jobs out there. There's plenty of companies out there. Ask yourself some of these questions. Figure out what it is that makes your team unique, and figure out what makes you proud of what you do as a company. So one of the things I think that we like to build upon, and why we like to build upon your strengths, is because they really help you define your vision, and they help amplify and enhance what you do operationally. When you kind of think about it, I'm going to use an odd example, but we're going to talk about an auto shop. So when you think about an auto shop, you have a shop that's really good at oil changes, and you have a shop that's really good at transmission and engine repair. And when you think about what makes you unique, and in this auto shop, you find that you're very, very good at transmission repair, right? So you dig in and you say, well, what makes us good at that? Our team gets energized by doing this. They love to problem solve. They like these complex engine issues and how to get to the bottom of it. And you have to also then say, okay, well, what keeps us from amplifying upon that strength? And so from there, again, kind of thinking about this auto shop, if you realize that you're doing more and more oil changes than you expect, and you realize as you do those oil changes, the team kind of the morale drops, no one's really excited about it, you start to realize, we may have a challenge in our hands. And so you have to figure out, is the oil change situation holding you back? Is it just simply a challenge? It's an annoyance. It's part of the business and we let it go? Or is it a roadblock? And if it's a roadblock, how do we consider getting it out of the way? What can we do? So when we start any of our engagements, we always begin with looking at a company's operations and figuring out what makes them successful and what makes them tick, because we're going to build a foundation of success upon that already existing strength. And we often look for those strengths as well, because if you're rapidly growing, there's a reason why. And that's something you can build on as well. So that's kind of your first thing. Know your strengths, know what you're good at. Number two is assessing your business core. So now that we know what our strengths are, we want to stop and say, okay, let's look at our core. What are we good at inside? And what do we need to stop and reassess? So when we say looking at business core, we're really talking about the key areas of your organizational health. And we like to use puzzle pieces because, as anybody that's done business management or business operations knows, that oftentimes it's like putting a puzzle together or taking one apart in some cases and starting over and putting it back together. But as you can see, these are the 4 pieces that we consider the center or the core of that puzzle. You'll notice too that this diagram doesn't really have a border around it. That's on purpose. We want to make sure that as you're putting puzzle pieces around, the border is the vision of your company. Eventually, you'll have a full border, and that vision is where you're taking the company. And as you're leading your team towards that, you're putting in additional puzzle pieces. And anytime you add another puzzle piece in, it should help to clarify that big picture, that image that comes across the top of the puzzle, but it shouldn't necessarily take away from it. So if you put a puzzle piece in, it's not quite the right fit, then you might consider, is this adding or taking away from the big picture? Is it getting us closer to our vision and our border? So we're going to dive into each of these areas: organizational structure, optimization of operations, communication, and team dynamics. And ultimately, we're going to look at how do you become really, really good at these core pieces so that your business starts working for you and without you. And ultimately, something that works for your growth. So to get us started, we're going to start with our org structure. We often call this the foundation. It's the base of what you're building. And if you think about it like the foundation of your house, you don't start by just building the foundation of your kitchen. You build the foundation of your entire home structure to be. And once you've built that, then you start putting up your walls. And you might run out of budget, have to start with just putting up the kitchen walls. But as long as the team is really looking at everything inside that structure the same way and focused on the same section of the building, you're going to be fine. So org structure includes things like your organizational chart, reporting structure, the defined job roles, the delineation of responsibilities. So think of org structure, again, like that foundation, but also lanes within where people operate. And it matters to get these right and to really focus on these, because when you do get them right, you're going to see an increase in productivity. You're going to see team synergy begin to develop as well as, enhance. And then ultimately, you're going to improve employee satisfaction. When I know what my job is and I know what I'm supposed to do every single day, I know whether or not I'm successful at it. Because I know that if I do task A, I've reached the goal of my job. I've done what I'm responsible for. So the other thing that I like to kind of remind folks in this segment is, we're talking to rapidly scaling companies. I see this, the folks that are here today, you guys are a part of companies that are growing rapidly. You're also seeing different changes take place every day in your company. Keep in mind that what you build today may not be exactly what you need tomorrow. And so we want to always be cognizant that we may have to make adjustments along the way. But again, going back to that puzzle, if the vision and the pieces that you're putting in still take you towards that vision, even if you have to pull a piece out, it's okay. You're still making a long-term investment and it's going to pay off in the end. So org structure, fun little place to look at inside your core. The other thing we like to look at is our operations. Imagine that. Operations company likes to look at operations. Part of the reason we do this is because when your org structure works, it means the operations usually clicks in right behind it. And so we know where everything goes. Now we've got to know how to do everything. So a lot of times we call this the GSD factor. It's the get stuff done factor. And all great companies can optimize what they're doing. And when they do, that's when you really start to see the results of your company increase and elevate. And so when we're talking about operations, we're talking about the ability to consistently deliver whatever it is, whether it's a product or a service. If you can consistently deliver that to your clients, then your client satisfaction is going to be fantastic. The other piece of that is project management usually rolls into all of this. When you're doing some sort of delivery or product, you're also looking at, okay, we need to make sure that we know where we're headed. We're planning things out, that project management component. I think the other piece to it as well is that you're going to want to make sure that when you get this right, you are meeting your sales and revenue goals. You'll see that the more you can keep operations and sales in pace with one another, you'll actually reach those goals time and time again. You'll keep up with that growth. and you're going to maximize on your team's strengths. One of the things we see in smaller organizations is that many times folks are having to wear multiple hats, which can be really challenging because, again, going back to org structure, I don't necessarily know which job is my required task for the day. But when I know that I'm doing what I'm good at, I can build upon that. As a leader, we can see what our team members are good at, and we can build upon those things. So that's the goal here, is when you're really optimizing what you're doing inside your operations, you're actually going to be able to see your team's strengths increase each other. They're going to start to support each other a lot more. They're going to see where they can support each other. And your client satisfaction is a big piece of this. So we'll look at more of the kind of how to measure all of these things here in just a minute. But again, this is another piece to your core. Communication. This is a fun one, you guys. I don't know. Does anyone love getting a message and not understanding it? Oh man, I was hoping somebody would raise their hand. Okay. So I think the biggest thing about communication is, I call this the hard science. It is so difficult to get this right. But almost always simple is better. And yet it's harder. We sit down to write a speech and it takes us an hour, right? Because we have to write a 5-minute speech. But if we sit down to write a speech and we have an hour for the speech, easy, knock it out, no problem. So simple is better, but often harder. The other thing too is leadership matters here. What a leader says and what a leader does truly has to align, because communication comes in many forms: spoken, written, seen, right? So we have to see it and believe it. And so leadership really matters. Having intentional discussions around where the company is going, where the company is, why you do things within your company. And then one of the hardest things, I think, is sitting in difficult conversations. As leaders, most of us have had to do that at many points in our lives. As team members, we also have to do it. We have to sit down and say, I disagree with how we're doing this, and this is why. And then we have to listen to the other side and realize that we're wrong, right? Or maybe they are, or maybe we're both wrong. So those difficult conversations are a piece of communication, and they're a part of what makes it hard to get it right sometimes. But when we're intentional, when we are clear about what we're saying, you're going to start to see, again, your operations will improve, as well as the fact that your team and that camaraderie will increase. So again, it matters because clarity doesn't have to be complex. You can continually build on progress. Even when things go wrong, communicate it, figure out why it went wrong, and build on it. And then camaraderie and support are going to increase. If I raise my hand and I say, I need some support today, I can guarantee you every single team member here today and every team member on our team will say, I'm jumping in, what do you need? And that goes across the board, vice versa. So communication is a big, big piece of getting that core piece of your puzzle together. And then my favorite as well, team dynamics. So kind of brings it all together. If you consider this like the glue, right, that holds everything together, it's your team. It's how you interact with one another. One of the things that I consider is when we're working with companies, when you're looking at how you improve your team, you're really looking at how do you bring people and processes together. If you can get that structural alignment right, then ultimately everything clicks into place. An analogy that you might consider here is the door, right? So if your door is your people and that door frame is your process, you have to make sure they're in alignment. And the moment that they are, then you can open and close that door as often and as fast as you need, right? So if you've got those people, the door, able to move in and out of the processes, your door frame, you find that no matter where they are, they can do it well. And the part of the reason that this matters is your growth hinges from here. Anything you do requires the people around you. There are no organizations, even solopreneurs, cannot go alone. And I think that's one of the biggest things when you're building your team, when you're building your company, you have to make sure that your team dynamics are a big piece of the core of what you do, because getting it right means you're going to continue that growth. You're going to see employee morale continuously increase, and you're going to see the elements of trust and empowerment that are so hard to get to. But when you get it right, it's amazing the things you can do. So those are your 4 pieces. Those are your kind of 4 core components of the puzzle that you're putting together in your business. And I want to stop here because we do have a poll. We've covered quite a bit. So we're going to take a moment, and of course the chat is always open. We're going to drop a poll here. And the question is, what are other areas that you all see as important or critical to your business success? So we've got a couple listed out here. We have marketing and branding, fiscal management, communications externally with stakeholders, and then internal communications with your team, and then other. So if you have anything else, you can of course drop it in the chat. I love it, you guys. This is great. All right, so I'm going to share these results really quick. Hopefully, is it sharing it with you guys? I can't see it on my end. Okay, so everybody's a little different, right? And I think that's why we say you're putting puzzle pieces where it matters most for your company. You know what the next step is. You know what you've already got right. Your marketing branding's on point, so let's go worry about internal team communication. Your fiscal management is great. Cash flow is fantastic. We have all of the funding we need in the world, but no one knows about us. Let's go work on our marketing and branding. Those are the things that, you know what next needs to come next, but that's something to think about, is there are always going to be additional pieces that you want to look at. So next up, number 3, are we ready? We know our core areas. Now we need to ask the right questions. So it is great to know what to look at. Now we actually need to know what to ask our team, what to ask ourselves, what to ask our leaders in our company about making those core areas stronger. So we're going to go through, again, those 4 core areas, but we're going to look at the questions that you might consider as you're going through those spaces. So organizational structure, again, we kind of talked about, how everything goes together is extremely important. Does your team understand the roles and responsibilities of each employee across the organization? So one thing to know my job. It is another thing to understand who to go to when I have a question about something beyond my job. That's critical. You have to know everyone's role, at least to some degree. And so when we do these assessments, we actually send out surveys with 80 plus questions on it. And we ask questions like this, and we do it across an organization. And you'll see that, and you'll find this when you start asking your team. Some areas of the company understand what everyone's role is because they're constantly having to find people in each of these to help them succeed. Others live in their silo and they don't go anywhere. So it's hard for them to really grasp what other folks do. So that's question 1 that you can consider. Another is your organization's reporting structure always followed to ensure that consistency in communication, and oftentimes just as important, is accountability. Reporting structure it needs to be very well thought out, and it should also be very easy to follow. And if it's not being followed consistently, it's a big flag for us, and it should be for you as well, to really look at your organizational structure closer. So those are 2 questions you might consider for this area. Looking at operations, we're going to have 2 questions here. The first one is really one of the most fundamental questions for operations. And it's if your team regularly reaches goals and targets. So, and we're going to talk about goals here in just a minute, but the biggest thing here is if they aren't reaching those goals, if you feel like the metrics aren't either measuring them appropriately, or quite frankly, maybe they don't know the goal exists. So you have to really dig into the why behind this if you're not hitting it. The other thing, so this is kind of an internal question, but are the processes that you're using, are they consistent across all of your projects, all of your client deliverables? Because if they aren't, if everybody's doing everything in their own unique way, then you have a variety of client experiences that are occurring as well. And it's going to be extremely hard to figure out which of those client experiences is the right one. So really building basic templates is a huge hallmark for an organization that has optimized operations, because it means that I can jump in Justin's role or Bill's role or Nikki's role and fill in for the week while they're on vacation, so they don't have to miss a beat and our clients get the same experience. Those templates, those cadences that you build with your clients, those are extremely important, that they're consistent and that they're processes that are consistently followed. So that's your operations segment and communication. Again, this one's a hard one, you guys, but the questions aren't always so difficult. How do you rate the quality of communication within your organization? This is a question you can actually ask everyone on your team. How do you rate the quality of communication within our organization? And then ask your clients, do you feel up to date with how projects are going? Do you understand the services you're receiving? Do you feel like we tell you things in advance? Those kinds of questions help answer this question of, are clients consistently kept up to date with the project or service deliverables and their status? I do want to make one quick differentiation here. There are times where as a team member, I feel like our clients aren't kept up to date. But as a client executive, there is a point at which we need to wait to tell a client something so that we can present them with a solution alongside it. So there will be times where there's a discrepancy in communication internally to externally, and sometimes that's okay. But in many cases, what we mean by this question is, is the client in step with you from a communication standpoint? Do they know where you are in the process? And then team dynamics. So being able to have open communication with your team is extremely important, and it's imperative to having a positive team dynamic. So ask this question of yourself, right? Am I able to speak my mind and tell the truth even when others on the team disagree with me? And if you can answer yes, that's fantastic. Can you then ask that question of others, and will they also answer yes? So keep that in mind as you're asking your team these questions. Your answer and their answer may be very different, and that's okay. You want those differences because that's how you're going to figure out the areas that you have for improvement. And another question that kind of plays into that, do your team members act reliably from one moment to the next? Again, we want to make sure that processes are consistent, templates are available, communication is there, and then guess what? I can act reliably because you know what to expect of me because I know what's expected of me as well. And that's a big piece to it. So fantastic questions to ask. We have plenty more. So if you're getting into a segment of your business and you're like, I need more here in this section, give us a call or send us a chat and we'll definitely drop some more questions in there. But so far, does anyone have any questions? I do want to take a quick pause in case there are any, because we're about to dive into where you guys get to get pen and paper out. I kid. All right, you guys. Well, then let's head into our next segment. You've likely already started to form some ideas in your head of things you might want to change or improve. It's the beginning of the new year. So of course, everyone has kind of this, we're going to work better at X. So that's great. We absolutely want our clients setting goals, but the biggest thing is you need to set a goal with an action plan. A goal without an action plan is quite literally just that, a goal. You have no way to get there. So an action plan becomes your pathway of getting to that level of success. So we're going to look at how we start, and we're starting with KPIs. If you're familiar with KPIs, you're going to see these all over the place. We oftentimes consider KPIs as just one of the many tools to measure your success. But use your goals, use your strengths, use the audit findings that you've got, those questions you asked, use those answers to really build your KPIs. Consider also, what can you really track with each KPI? It's easy to say, we can count, how many calls we get, and the call count appears low, but maybe that doesn't even matter if your call center's quality on the calls is extremely poor. So think about, why does each KPI matter? And when it does matter, and it is important to measure, how do you measure it? And so that's going to help you really figure out how each KPI fits into that bigger picture of your organization and that bigger puzzle. What is going to help drive you towards your goals, whether that's improving quality, efficiency, effectiveness. So the other thing to remember is KPIs are often a rearview mirror concept. They're most easily used to analyze growth over time, but they might not be the right tool to actually help and develop that transformation. And then that's part of the role of that action plan that we're going to talk about. But then there are also times where KPIs can be used as leading indicators. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into how KPIs and goals can help move action forward here in just a few minutes. But do recognize there are leading and lagging KPIs. So there are times that you might actually use them to forecast sales or forecast activity that's coming up based on what's happened in the last month or week, however the frequency that you use. So how do we get KPIs into action? So you've got your annual goal. You're going to break it down into either quarterly or monthly targets. Then you're going to take those monthly targets and you're going to take them into weekly activities. Then you're going to create an action plan. So let's say that I want to have 100 new clients this month. And I know that I need to talk to 50 a week, right? So that I can secure these new clients. Well, then if I need to talk to 50 a week, that means I need to not only have them scheduled, I need to do the outreach. I need to figure out who I'm going to outreach to. So I'm going to build an action plan with tasks associated to these steps that are taking me one by one to that actual goal, to that KPI. So again, we're using those KPIs to measure ourselves towards our goal, to build a trend, but the action plan, the task associated with it, end up becoming our level of accountability. They're really going to help us figure out, okay, well, I said I needed to talk to 50 each week, I need to talk to 75. Can you get to 75 a week? Is that doable? If it's not, is your goal realistic or is it a stretch goal? Is it out of the, it's not possible? Do you need to bring in more resources? So these are all things that as you're building these out, it's going to end up triggering additional questions, and it should, but there are things that you need to consistently think about. And I think one of the most important pieces about KPIs and action plans and goals and moving your organization and your team forward is to make sure that you celebrate. Even the smallest changes need to be highlighted and celebrated whenever they're successful. For us, for our team, we find it extremely helpful to add this to our weekly meeting. It's a literal formal agenda item, and it's called Celebrations, Fun Finds, and Wins. So anytime that we find a fun fact, anytime that something fun happens in our families or our personal lives, anytime that something happens great for our clients, or quite frankly, anytime something's funny, we share it. We want to have that celebratory vibe within our culture. And it also, in turn, helps really decrease any change fatigue that starts to take place. This more of those small changes that you can really amplify and cheer on, the more it feels like you're just taking a step forward, not changing something. So it helps kind of change that mental mindset to what I like to consider. And that's that you've got these goals, you have the action plan, but there's this idea now in your team that changes in the air. And some people that excites them. Some people it causes a little bit of angst. You have to realize that we face change every single day. It's constant. It always happens. And when you really take it and you boil it down, change always happens. And we just like to call it growth. So change is growth. And what I mean by that is you've got these goals. And when you really look at and sit down and say, these are the goals, this is where we want to go, you have to consider the next step forward. You're not there today. The entire point of goal setting is to initiate that mental step towards change. Whereas an action plan is actually the step of doing. So you have these goals, which is the mental component of I'm ready to change. And you have the action plan, which is the pathway, the steps that are taking you and moving you towards those changes. So ultimately, the difference between taking and setting goals is talking and doing. And the plans are getting you there. You're making yourself go further down that path. The changes don't have to be big. They can be baby steps. And even those small baby steps can make a huge difference. A great example that we've experienced last year was we had a client that they had team meetings. They were 2 hours plus team meetings every week. And they were, quite frankly, they were painful, right? They were hard to sit through. I don't know how many people could sit for 2 hours solid and not wiggle. We were able to reduce those meetings down to 45 minutes a week. All we did was change the agenda. That was it. Just an agenda. It sounds so simple and so silly, but at the same time, they got back an hour plus every week over the course of 12 team members, over the course of 52 weeks. And when we added it all up, that small change was $100,000 plus in additional billable hours. That's it. Changed an agenda and found 6 figures in billable revenue. Tiny changes can be a difference maker. So keep in mind, you've set these goals because you want to change. You've created the action plans because you are ready to get there. You simply just have to make it growth. And I think one of the big pieces is when you create growth in your company, when you create change, there's this aspect of it needs to be sustainable. So our number 5 tip is creating sustainable change. You've got to make sure that you're considering the long-term implications of this change. Change is also one of those things that once you get in the rhythm of it, it's no longer change. It's innovation. It's continuous improvement. It's being cutting edge. It's being the one in the front of the pack. Once you realize that sustainable change is simply another way to say innovation, then you realize we're all innovators. And so we want to teach you a few of our tricks on how to build sustainable change into your organization, and also avoid that change fatigue that can happen. Any high growth startup company knows that you're moving quick and you're moving fast from day 0. So sustainable change is a big piece of making sure we get this right. In our office, we often use what we call AIM, and we consider this our roadmap to operational success. And so we're going to dig in a little bit to what this really is. When we say AIM, we're making that actually stand for something. And it's 3 different phases: analyze, innovate, and manage. And one of the big pieces I will say here is if you have already got something that you've hung your hat onto from a methodology standpoint, use it, keep it. This is simply for anyone that maybe hasn't had that resource available to them yet. And you might find that it's useful, but I think whatever you pick, make sure that your entire organization is using that same methodology. So we'll dig in real quick to what this means to us. And hopefully you've either already have something or you'll consider using this. But when we start with analyze, we're really looking at what is the current state of our organization. Those core pieces that we talked about a little while ago, those questions to ask inside those core pieces. What does today look like? What are the goals we've set for our organization? And what does it really look like to be successful? From an operational perspective, tomorrow we would be successful if X. What is that? So that's the analyze phase. What's going on today? Next, we have innovate, something that we find builds excitement, sometimes anticipation. But the biggest piece here is what's creating a barrier or a roadblock in getting in the way of us getting to those goals that we talked about and analyze. And maybe more importantly, what's working great? What are those strengths that we started with? And how do we build on those? This is a very collaborative phase that we find with many organizations, and you can leverage talent across your team. So you may find that, I think someone commented and said marketing and branding is an issue, right? Well, that might be something that you need to reach to another department and say, hey, we really don't know how to talk about ourselves over here. That's, lean on each other and find ways to really, build across your organization as you innovate. And then manage. Talking about sustainable change, management of it is a huge piece of it. And we are going to share a few more resources on the manage component here in just a moment. But believe it or not, there's some pretty easy and powerful ways to keep this train running. And you'll probably also notice that there's no end gate here. There's no step out, because like I said a moment ago, it's inevitable that we're constantly facing change. But when you are able to do it right, it becomes innovation. And we want it to be growth for you. So hopefully you're already kind of thinking, where can I use this? How do I use this? When do I use this? You can literally use it any time of the day, every day, any point in your organization. So whether you want to use it at a grand scale, looking at the whole organization, or down to a division level, down to a department or a single employee, you can absolutely use this methodology the entire way through. So one of the other things to consider when you're using this, especially in your innovate and analyze phases, is do we need someone outside of our team to look? And it doesn't always have to be outside of your company, keep in mind. It can actually be just simply someone outside of your department or outside of your current circle. Sometimes it's just someone outside of your head, right? So keep that in mind as well. Use the resources around you. And then how do we manage and maintain this? So we've talked about our KPIs. Build yourself a dashboard, monitor your overall company health, and also monitor change. Build a sub dashboard if necessary to figure out what are the components that when we move these forward, we know we've made progress. Keep that in mind. And then really develop an action plan. Like we've said, you've got your goals, you need that action plan, and check it off. Check them off. Have somebody hold you accountable to it if you're a solopreneur. And then also develop a committee. You know, again, this might be where you have to reach out beyond your own team, beyond yourself and beyond your walls and say, hey, I'm building a change committee. I'm building a board of advisors, whatever it may be. Build a committee that their job is to actually keep the change initiatives moving forward. And then find a change champion. You probably need to hire someone whose entire job description is based on success. VP of strategy, strategy director, VP of innovation, change project manager. It can be a variety of different titles, but someone whose job is quite literally to keep things on track. And keep them on track, keep them on the schedule, build a cadence where every other week we sit down and we talk about everything we've done in the last 2 weeks to move everything forward. And in those meetings, make sure that you have a clear host, you have a facilitator of some kind, you have an agenda. The person's job that is in charge of hosting and facilitating should be to keep the meeting on track and make sure that nothing gets missed, and then add things to either additional business or something along those lines to, again, keep things moving forward. And then if we haven't said it already, we'll say it again, celebrate. Make sure you celebrate. Put it on your agenda each week. Find something fun to celebrate. If you need a random fact to add to your agenda, call anyone on our team. We have thousands. Google is your friend for that as well. So, all right, we've covered a lot. What questions do we have? And I was going to say, and our team will hop off mute here as well.
I actually have a question. I was thinking back on that team dynamics. I think, as you know already, we had our firm and then we acquired my law partner's dad's real estate practice and also inherited some of his workers. So we have some people have been, working in the real estate transaction business for like 30 years. And then we have other newer people that we brought on. Wondering thoughts about tips for navigating that, because it's a little difficult to manage such different experience levels.
I can understand that completely. Team, does anybody want to jump in on that? If not, I can. Okay. So I think, Michelle, it's a great question, because we see that in a variety of ways. We see it when organizations are adding team members with experience or adding team members that are brand new out of college. We also see it when companies are merging together, right? So I think the biggest piece is going to be making sure that each person feels valued, that each person understands where their experiences fit in an organization, and also why they're still there. I think one of the biggest things that comes up, especially during times of change and transition, is the question of, am I still needed here, or should I be here? And so as long as you can get that fear out of their heads, I think that's your number one goal. And then, we see a lot of companies that do annual or quarterly meetings that are focused simply on the team as a whole, and then highlighting each person's role inside that. Because again, kind of earlier, we talked about that component of not knowing why each person is at the table, right? We want diversity in our teams. We want unique perspectives. We want experience at every level. You've got to have that. And you've got to have that understanding across the board. And then I think there will be times where some folks don't need to stay. And those are the tough conversations. There are going to be times too, where you might be able to set up some sort of mentor program. Your younger folks or folks that aren't sitting in that chair. I lean on Nikki all the time, and I reach out to her and I'm like, okay, I have no clue how to do this with branding and marketing. What do we do? And she does a wonderful job with our clients of figuring that out. Whereas I can't answer those questions sometimes. So again, building kind of that camaraderie across the team, I think, is helpful. And individual, it's a lot of work. I mean, managing your team is always going to be a lot of work. So hopefully, I mean, does that kind of help?
It does.
Okay.
I think we're kind of in a situation where there's a little bit of animosity. So
Mhm.
it's, so like building camaraderie when, there's a few steps to even get to camaraderie.
Right. Exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised too, like we find that, so with our assessment, we use it across the entire organization. And with some of our clients, we actually have customized sections for them because they've identified that as a challenge, right? So you would create a survey that literally says, we want to know how you feel about your experienced team members. Do you find value in your new hire team members that are entry level? Like you could build out an entire segment of a survey that says, we just want to figure out what it is that's making people uncomfortable or questioning a segment of this piece of our organization. And then we actually present that data to the entire team. And it's all anonymous. So no one knows who answered what. But it allows the entire team to realize whether they're in the majority or they're not. Are you experiencing someone that's the really loud, they're really just, they can't let it go type, and they're the only one that thinks that way? I genuinely think that Johnny Smith needs to go. He can't stay. He's the worst, right? But then everyone else adores Johnny Smith. They reach out to him whenever they need support. They always know that he's there for them. That's where you can figure out too, do we share these results with the entire team this way? Do we have a direct conversation and air it out, that kind of thing. But it's definitely a tough spot. And there's a lot of organizations as they grow. I like to say it's a 3-year bus ride. There's a year to figure out who on the team should still be here, who's the right fit for the bus. There's a year to get those that shouldn't be there off the bus and get those that should be on the bus. And then there's the year that you finally get to start actually moving forward. So it's a 3-year bus ride. It's a long bus or a long path. So we also had a question submitted in about what is the best method to air the disagreements. I think it depends on what the disagreement is. If it is a team member to team member disagreement, I've seen it done a variety of ways. I think your team best, whether or not you can set them down in a room and they'll be professional with one another. And then there's also the disagreements about how you manage, how you operate. Is this a process that should be used? Those kinds of disagreements, I think, are really useful to have in a larger team setting, and almost always useful to have someone that doesn't do that process in the room. Because I think that external viewpoint ends up being so powerful because they'll ask a question that no one can answer, and it'll make everyone think. So I think that's usually a useful way to go as well. So hopefully that answered that question.
And this is your explanation, Marie, made me think of potentially another component of that you might want to expand on a little bit, which is kind of the role of team building activities and icebreakers and helping people really get to know each other on a personal level. I think you've had an experience with that recently.
I did, actually. I had a really fun experience, you guys. So smaller team, you would think, has a lot more conversations. They're smaller. There's only, 8 of them. So of course, everybody knows everything about everyone. And I actually went and sat down. We hosted a workshop on site with a group. And I have what I call a Marie Classic icebreaker. And we went around the room and we started sharing these facts about everybody. And one particular team member shared about 8 to 10 facts about himself. And, we just kept moving. And someone before the next person could stopped and said, "Oh my God, I don't think I've ever heard you talk that much in the entire year you've worked here." You guys, sometimes we literally have to be so intentional about asking people about themselves. And that goes with not only just knowing about them as a person, but also knowing about them with their strengths. And so, yeah, Justin, that was a fun one for me because I was like, oh my goodness, my little classic icebreaker. I can't say it out loud because then I can't use it because it has like a twist in it. But it's one of those, it was fun for me because I was like, I've done this for years. I mean, years using this icebreaker. And that was the first time that I think someone had stopped and said, "Oh my God, you've been in the same building as me for a year and I never knew any of this." Not even his favorite color or his favorite food, you guys, like little, or the fact that he like had a different first name. That's cool. So I learned more about him in the 1 hour than they had known in a year. But
Any other questions? Oh, Dawn, I saw you come up.
Yeah, not so much a question, but all of our team members are remote. We've always been a remote company. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to make sure everybody is connected and so that's difficult. And, for a time, because we do a monthly newsletter. And so we had a section that was guess your teammate. And so I would get with one of them and say, hey, do you have 3 or 4 fun facts I can put in? Then people can, but I don't know that anybody really participated in that, so what's key to keeping a team that's all over the country connected with each other besides the weekly meetings that they attend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
So this is my first full year with Boost, and we are all also virtual. And 2 things that we do pretty frequently. The first one's not as frequent, but now that we've done it, we want to do it more frequently. This past Christmas, we had a virtual holiday party, and Marie sent us all basically like, masks and puzzles and game pieces, and they were just like printed off pieces of paper, nothing too crazy. And you could even have them download things that you have already put together. They just download it. That way you don't have to ship anything. And we got on a Zoom call, like about, I think it was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, something like that. It was a 2-hour, 3-hour thing. And honestly, we played games. We made something. We made a gingerbread house, for example. We played kind of a trivia game, and it was a lot of fun. And then the other thing is that we do pretty frequently, or we try to, we hold open office hours, and it might usually be after a meeting just because that's where everybody's there. And what we do is we can either turn off camera and your microphone, and we honestly just sit there with kind of like a room full of people essentially, and we just work. And so that if I have a question for Justin, then I just pop on. I'm like, hey Justin, do you know about A, B, and C, or do you know when that's due, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of just like you're sitting in a room together. And I think it's really, and sometimes we get off a tangent, like office talk, if you will. And I think a lot of us have actually mentioned that that's the one key thing that we've missed from being virtual to in office is the chit chat, the water cooler talk, if you will. So we all really enjoy the office hours.
Yeah, that's an interesting
It's awkward
idea.
at first.
Mhm. Yeah, and so imagine, so all of our employees are accounting professionals, right? So they're not the most interactive to begin with. I'm not an
But they
accountant.
still have
so,
jokes.
Yeah,
I'm sure they
that's
still have
true.
jokes.
That's true. But that might be something to think about. We do a monthly happy hour, but it's not mandatory. So, 1 month we'll have 10 people, another month, like this past one, we had 1 employee. So, but it was fun because Elliot and I got to talk to her. But yeah, so the office hours idea is interesting. We'll have to explore that. Thank you.
Yeah, and your happy hour definitely includes some games, like some things that some of your other people are already interested in, that that they might trigger conversation. So maybe it's like a trivia night, like 1 month. The next month might be online charades or somehow, like they draw on the notebook.
Something to get them to show up.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that too.
Well, and we even, I think on our holiday party, I think we were supposed to do it on little like plates on our head, but like, draw this and you have to draw it, but we did it because I'm just not coordinated enough. We did it on paper and we closed our eyes, and you like have to draw, and then you compare everybody's drawings, and it's like, well, wow, like some of us can't draw.
Right.
So yeah, and that's a great point that Stu dropped in the chat too.
He mentioned small Amazon or Starbucks gift cards. And honestly, Dawn, another quick idea is, I know they're monthly, and I think that's fantastic. But if you're noticing a drop off in attendance, maybe you lessen the amount of get together. So maybe it's like once a quarter, or once every 2 months. That way you kind of know, like, they're not like, oh, here we go again, a monthly thing. Or maybe it's just a rough month, that kind of idea. So
Mhm.
Well, and I
Great.
think one of the other things we tried too, so one of our core components is that we are community and family focused. It's just a piece of what all of us appreciate about life. And when COVID hit, we weren't able to actually go into our communities. Used to, when we were a little bit smaller, several of us were located in the same spot. So we were like potentially going to be able to. And especially now that we're fully virtual across the nation, we actually will pick an organization that we will provide services to it basically for free. And we'll do that together as a team for the course of, 3 months, 6 months, or something like that. Obviously, every company can do that at a different level, but maybe something like that where you all get to vote on a particular organization or put organizations in the hat and then vote and then donate some time to promoting their organization online as a team or something like that. So depending on obviously your service offerings, that might be something you can do. So
any other questions or comments, concerns you guys want to bring up?
yeah, this has been great.
Yeah.
Great questions.
All right. So I'm going to just drop our contact information. If you guys have any questions after the, this meeting, feel free to definitely reach out to us. We're happy to help you. Or just some similar ideas just like this is great. We have a newsletter as well. So if you want a lot of this content that you're listening to today, a lot of that is in our newsletters. So we are grateful enough that we have somebody write blogs and then we break it down and we have like a lot of good conversations. So, and then our gift to you for joining today is we are actually offering a free mini operations and audit and workshop. So essentially we can get together and you guys can contact me. I'll leave or you can actually email the admin account. It's up there. It'll come to Marie and I. And essentially what it is we'll get with your team. We'll do like a mini survey, see where you think that your organization is. And then we break it down and we show you where your strengths and where some new opportunities might be able to arise. And then, yeah, we walk you through it. We work with you one-on-one. And yeah, so if you guys have any questions or you want to sign up, just reach out to Marie or I, and then we'll go from there. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And Michelle, we wish you all the best. I hope you guys can get over that hump. And Dawn, you'll have to let us know what you guys go with to see what works, and maybe we can try it too.
Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good.
This was
Have a
great.
good afternoon, guys.
Information. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye now.